I didn't fall for Mara Sinclair the night I pulled her out of the Kestrel River. I want to be honest about that, because every time somebody hears the short version, they get a soft look on their face like they already know how it ends, and the soft version is a lie. The first thing I felt when my hands found her coat under that black water wasn't tenderness. It was a flat, animal fear, the kind that scrapes every thought out of your skull and leaves nothing but the next second and the second after that. My name is Wade Halloran. That winter, I was 31 and I ran a 2-truck towing and roadside recovery outfit out of a metal garage on the edge of Marlette, Montana, right where the county road starts its long climb up toward Coldwater Pass. I'd built the whole shape of my life around things that made sense when people didn't. An engine either turns over or it doesn't. A brake line tells you the truth every time. Ice on a road has physics, not moods. A frozen fuel filter never once looked me in the eye and told me it was fine while it quietly killed the whole machine. People did that. People did that all the time. So I lived alone in the apartment over my garage, drank coffee at hours that weren't really coffee hours anymore, took the calls nobody else wanted, because the pass at 2 in the morning in January is not a place most tow operators are dying to be, and I told my little sister Robin I was just taking a season off from dating. The season had been going on for a little over 3 years by then. At some point, a break stops being a break and turns into the way you've decided to build the house. The night I pulled Mara out, I wasn't supposed to be on that road at all. I'd finished dropping a stranded pickup at the impound lot, and I was maybe 4 minutes from home, from a bad TV dinner and a colder bed, when dispatch crackled about a possible vehicle off the embankment near the old Coldwater Bridge. Freezing rain had been coming down since sundown, that ugly kind that skips snow entirely and just glazes everything in glass. The county had run out of sand by 9. I almost keyed the mic to say I was off shift. I keyed it to say I was headed that way instead. I still don't have a clean reason for that. I've stopped looking for one. By the time my headlights swung across the guardrail, there wasn't anybody there yet. No trooper, no ambulance, just a gouge torn through the frozen gravel where a car had gone through the rail and down toward the water, and taillights half drowned and tilting in the current below. The Kestrel isn't a wide river up there, but it's fast and it's cold enough in January to stop your heart out of pure spite. I remember standing at the broken rail for exactly 1 heartbeat, doing the math a rational man is supposed to do, and then I remember not doing the math at all. I went down the bank on my heels and my hands. The cold when I hit the water came up through my chest like a fist. It took the breath clean out of me, and for a second, I just made a sound, no words, just noise. The car had nosed in against a boulder, and the driver's window was already gone, and there was an arm. That's what I saw first. A pale arm and a wristwatch catching my flashlight, and a woman fighting the belt with fingers that had already gone clumsy from the cold. "I've got you," I told her, which was a lie in the sense that I did not yet have anything. The belt latch was jammed with pressure from the water. I had a folding knife in my coat, and I cut the webbing, and she came loose all at once and grabbed a fistful of my jacket, and then, weirdly, she let go of me again, almost immediately, like grabbing on had embarrassed her. I got an arm across her chest the way you're taught, and I hauled us both back toward the bank against a current that pulled a lot harder than it looked. Her eyes, when there was finally enough light to see them, weren't just scared. That's the part that stayed lodged in me for weeks after. She was half frozen, coughing river water, and underneath the fear there was this hot, bright fury, like she was furious that her own body had put her here, furious to be seen like this. I've thought about that look 100 times since. At the time I just thought, this one isn't going to break easy. The trooper and the ambulance got there while I was still wrapping her in the wool blanket I keep behind this seat. The EMTs did their thing, wrapped her tighter, took her vitals, asked her the standard questions. Name. Any pain. Did she hit her head? Could she tell them what day it was? She answered all of it in this clipped, careful way, and I noticed she kept leaving one thing out. Nobody asked her the one question, and she didn't offer it. How a car goes clean through a guardrail on a straight, if icy, stretch of road she clearly knew well. She gave her name as Mara Sinclair. It didn't mean anything to me right then, which she seemed to register, and to be grateful for. They wanted to take her in for observation. She refused, signed the form against medical advice with a hand that was shaking, And I watched a paramedic exchange a look with the trooper that said they'd both seen this movie before and didn't like how it usually ended. The trooper asked if she had somewhere safe to go. She said yes. He asked who could come get her, and she went quiet in a way that told me the true answer to that question was nobody she trusted. I don't know exactly why I said it. My garage is a mile back down the road. There's a couch. There's heat. She can dry off and call somebody in the morning. The trooper looked at me the way you'd look at a stranger who just volunteered for something, weighing me, and Mara looked at me the same way, and I remember thinking that whatever was chewing on her, she trusted a random tow driver more than she trusted going home. That should have told me the whole story right there. She said yes. The apartment over my garage is not much. One big room, a kitchen along the back wall, a couch older than I am, a window that looks out over the yard and the mountains past it. I gave her a pair of my sweatpants and a flannel shirt and a clean towel and pointed her at the little bathroom. And I made coffee because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. When she came out, wrapped in my two big clothes with her wet hair pushed back, she looked around the room the way people do when they're cataloging exits. I got a blanket off the back of the couch, and I want to be clear about what I did with it, because it matters to me. I set it on the arm of the chair next to her, instead of putting it around her shoulders myself. I don't have a good rule about this stuff written down anywhere. It just seemed obvious that a woman who'd spent the night being handled by strangers, however kindly, might want for 5 minutes to be the one who decided who touched her. She noticed. She looked at the blanket, and then at me, and something in her face loosened by about 10%. "Thank you," she said. "It's just a blanket." For not making me ask. I let that sit. I poured the coffee. She held the mug like it was the only warm thing in the county, and for a while neither of us said much. Then her phone, which she'd fished out of the pocket of her ruined coat and set on the table to dry, lit up. She didn't reach for it. She just looked at it the way you'd look at a wasp that landed on your plate. It buzzed again. Then again. "You can get that," I said. "I know I can." The name on the screen was Trevor. I could see it from where I stood, upside down. She let it ring out, and I watched her decide something, and then she started talking. Not to me exactly. More like she'd been holding it underwater and it finally came up. His name was Trevor Ames. He was her fiancé, or he had been up until about 4 hours earlier, depending on which of them you asked. And depending on whether a thing that was mostly business had ever really been an engagement at all. Her father, Harlan Sinclair, had built the Sinclair Summit Lodge and the land around it up over 40 years, a whole resort operation on the mountain. And when he died 14 months back, he'd left it wrapped up in a family trust with a board and votes and lawyers, and Mara held the largest single block of that vote because she'd been the one who actually worked the place beside him. Trevor had come into the picture 2 years before. That. Smooth and useful. Good with numbers, better with people, the kind of man who could make a room believe he was the only calm one in it. That night there'd been a donor dinner at the lodge. Before it, Trevor had put a revised trust document in front of her and asked her to sign. An amendment. Something about consolidating operational authority ahead of the spring board meeting, softened up in the kind of language that's designed to make you feel unreasonable for reading it too closely. She'd read it too closely. She'd said no. They'd argued out on the access road by the river after the dinner. In the sleet, in the dark, and somewhere in the middle of that argument her car had gone through the rail. She stopped there. She didn't finish that part. And I didn't push, because I've pulled enough people out of enough wrecks to know that the version somebody gives you at 2 in the morning is a rough draft, and you don't get to demand the final one. Her phone buzzed a 4th time. This time it was a text, and she read it, and her whole face went flat and still. Not panicked, still. Like some part of her had learned a long time ago that moving around gave people something to grab onto. "He knows I'm not at the hospital," she said quietly. "He's calling around. He found the garage a little before 4. I heard the truck first, the crunch of tires on the frozen gravel of my yard, then headlights washing across the window. I killed the lamp on instinct. Mara went to that same stillness she'd had on the phone, only deeper now, both hands wrapped around the cold coffee mug like it was ballast. I pulled up the app for the security camera I keep on the garage bay, more to catch people boosting tools than anything, and there he was under the yellow bulb over the office door. Trevor Ames, still in a dinner shirt with the collar open and the sleeves rolled, no coat, standing in freezing rain like the weather was for other people. He wasn't pounding. He wasn't yelling. He had one hand flat on the doorframe and he was looking, calm as Sunday, straight up into the camera he'd apparently already found. A calm man on your property at 4 in the morning is worse than an angry one. An angry one you understand. My phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't have saved, and the message was for Mara. I understood that immediately, meant to be read over my shoulder. Mara is confused and not thinking clearly right now. She's had a traumatic night. Please have her come out so I can get her the help she needs, before this becomes a bigger problem for everyone. She read it standing behind me. Her jaw tightened. See, she said, and there was no fight in it, just exhaustion. That's how it always sounds. It always sounds like he's the reasonable one. No, I said. What I see is a man putting threats in writing. I took a screenshot. Then I took another. Don't delete anything he sent you. Texts, voicemails, anything. Not tonight, not tomorrow, nothing. I wasn't going to. I mean anything. From him, from anybody who suddenly urgently needs to know exactly where you are and how you're doing. I don't know why I knew to say that. Divorces, mostly. You'd be amazed what people put in writing to a tow contractor when there's a boat or an RV caught up in who gets what. People get real creative the second they think property's on the table. Something changed in her face when I said the word property. Not fear this time. Something sharper, recognition. I didn't sign anything, she said. Okay. No, you don't get it. Her voice came alive, and for the first time all night she sounded less like a survivor and more like a woman who'd run a business. The amendment. He needed my signature before the spring board meeting, which is Monday. I said no. That's what the fight was about. And then she stopped and made herself keep going. And then after, when he was helping me look at the front tire, he said my mother already thinks I've been unstable since Dad died. Overwhelmed. Not myself. And if it looks like I drove off that road because I was falling apart. She didn't finish. She didn't have to. There it was. Not just a bad fiancé. A bad fiancé with paperwork and a timeline. Downstairs the knocker finally listened, slow and even. 3 raps and a pause. 3 raps and a pause. Mara. His voice carried up through the floor, controlled, almost gentle. I know you're up there. This is getting embarrassing. Just come down and let me take care of you. The word take care went through her like a current. I watched her hand drift up to her wrist, to the paper hospital band the EMTs had put on, and she hadn't cut off. And she pressed her thumb against it like she was checking it was real. I picked up my phone and dialed 911 without asking her permission, and I only realized after that, maybe I should have. But she didn't stop me. She watched me do it, and her shoulders came down a 1/4 inch, and I understood that nobody had called anybody on her behalf in a long, long time. I told the dispatcher there was a man on my property who wouldn't leave, that a woman here didn't feel safe, that he was sending threatening messages. I gave the address twice because the pass roads confuse people. Deputy Kessler was 20 minutes out on the good nights, and this wasn't a good night. I hung up and stood at the top of the stairs and I called down, "She's not coming out, Trevor, and you're being recorded. Right now, both cameras." There was a silence. Then, very reasonable, very warm, "You have no idea what you're getting into. She's not well. Her family's going to be very worried about the man who kept her locked in a garage." And I'll be honest, that one landed. Not because I believed it, because I could suddenly see, whole and clear, exactly how easy it would be for a man like that to reshape a night like this into a story where I was the villain and he was the frantic loved one. He wasn't threatening me with violence. He was threatening me with a narrative. "Cameras are still running," I said, which was all I had. He knocked once more, softer, almost affectionate, and then I heard the truck door and the engine, and the headlights swung back across the window and were gone. He left before the deputy came. Of course he did. Men like that always know exactly how long the leash is. Deputy Kessler took the report at my kitchen table while Ma sat wrapped in the couch blanket. Finally, having decided herself to put it around her shoulders, she was careful with her words the same way she'd been careful with the paramedics. She didn't say Trevor forced the car off the road. She didn't say he pushed her. She said what she knew, that they'd argued at the rail, that he'd had a hand on her arm, that the car had gone over, that she'd been in the water and he had not gone in after her. She said she didn't know if he'd panicked, or if he'd stood there and let the river decide. She said she couldn't prove which, and she wasn't going to pretend she could. Kessler wrote it all down. He was young and tired and decent, and I could tell he believed her, and also that belief and evidence are two different animals, and that there was no camera on that stretch of the Coldwater Bridge, and no witness, and a car full of river water that would tell a physics story, but not a moral one. He told her she could file for a temporary protective order in the morning, told her to keep every message, told her not to be alone if she could help it. Then he left too, and it was just us again, and gray light was starting to come up over the ridge. "You should sleep," I said. "I don't think I'm going to." She didn't, neither did I. We sat and watched the sky go from black to the color of dishwater, and somewhere in there she told me about her father and about her mother. Her mother's name was Catherine. Catherine Sinclair had never quite forgiven Mara for loving the lodge more than she'd loved leaving the mountain. And after Harlan died, Catherine had folded, quietly and completely, into the version of things that required the least of her. And the version Trevor sold, that Mara was grieving, overworked, prone to overreacting, that she needed protecting from her own decisions, that version let Catherine off the hook. If her daughter was unwell, then Catherine's coldness looked like caution instead of abandonment. Trevor had understood that about the mother before he'd ever understood anything about the daughter. Worry was just another tool he knew how to pick up and hold. "When I called her tonight," Mara said, staring into a mug that had gone cold hours ago from the ambulance. "First thing I did, I called my mother and I told her I'd gone off the road and that Trevor had been standing right there and hadn't come in after me." She stopped. "You know what she said?" She said, "Mara, honey, are you sure that's what happened? You've been under so much strain." She laughed, one short cough of a laugh with nothing funny in it. "My own mother, first instinct. Are you sure that's what happened?" I didn't say anything smart. There wasn't anything smart to say. I just said, "I believe you." She looked at me for a long second. "You don't even know me." "No," I said, "but I pulled you out of a river a few hours ago, and I've been listening to you talk for 4 of them, and not once have you told me anything that got bigger every time you told it. People who are making it up, it grows. Yours keeps shrinking. You keep taking things out because you can't prove them." I shrugged. "I fix things for a living. I know what it sounds like when somebody's telling you the actual problem instead of the one that makes them look better." She didn't cry. I think she was too far past it. But she put the cold mug down and pressed both hands flat against my kitchen table like she needed to feel something that wasn't going to move. And she said very quietly, "Nobody's said that to me in a year. I'm going to skip ahead here, because the middle of a thing like this is mostly phone calls and nobody needs 40 minutes on the paperwork." The board meeting was Monday. Before it, we did the unglamorous work. Mara's father had kept a lawyer, an old friend named Gloria Nadler, semi-retired, who wore reading glasses on a chain, and had the affect of a woman who'd stopped being impressed by rich people sometime in the previous century. Mara had been afraid to call her, I think because calling Gloria meant admitting out loud that the family had come to this. But she called, and Gloria listened to the whole thing without a single interruption, and at the end, she said, "Send me every message. Everyone. And do not, under any circumstances, sign anything before Monday, even if he shows up with a priest and a violin." We spent Sunday at the garage building the file. Screenshots of Trevor's texts, time-stamped, the 911 record, Kessler's report, the AMA form from the hospital with its time on it, which put Mara lucid and refusing care within an hour of a supposed breakdown. Gloria pulled the actual amendment Trevor had wanted signed and read it out loud to us over the phone in a dry, flat voice, translating each buried clause into plain English. And by the third one, Mara had gone pale, because the thing didn't just consolidate operational authority. It routed her voting power through an advisory committee during any period she was deemed temporarily incapacitated, and it gave Trevor and one physician the power to make that determination. He hadn't been trying to get her to sign away the lodge. He'd been trying to get her to sign away the definition of her own competence. "That's the whole game," Gloria said over the speaker, and I could hear her tapping a pen. "He didn't need you to hand him the company, Mara. He needed you to hand him the right to decide when you're too crazy to keep it. Then the river was just going to do the rest for him." A woman who drives off a bridge and refuses the hospital and shows up disheveled at a stranger's garage at 4 in the morning. That's not a story that needs a signature. That's a story that sells itself. You'd have spent the next 2 years proving you weren't unwell, and every day you spent proving it would have been a day you looked like exactly what he said you were. Nobody said anything for a moment. So we don't play that game, Gloria went on. Monday, you don't defend yourself. You never once say, I'm not unstable. The second you defend, you're on his field. Monday, you present. You put the timeline in front of the board. You let the documents talk. And you let them watch a man who wrote, before this becomes a bigger problem for everyone at 4 in the morning, try to explain himself in a boardroom in daylight. Facts, Mara. Boring, ugly, timestamped facts. Panic reads as instability. But a man who panics in legal language is still panicking, and everybody in that room will smell it. Monday morning, the lodge conference room smelled like old coffee and lemon polish, and I sat in a chair against the back wall because Mara had asked me to be there, and Gloria had said having the man who pulled her out of the water in the room wouldn't hurt the optics. Catherine Sinclair sat near the front in a camel coat, not looking at her daughter. Trevor sat across the long table, looking exactly as calm as he'd looked under my garage light, which is to say, too calm, the calm of a man who has never once in his life considered that the room might not be his. I won't give you the whole meeting. It wasn't a movie. There was no moment where somebody stood up and pointed a finger and the music swelled. It was Gloria in her reading glasses, laying pages on the table one at a time, saying the times out loud in a voice with no color in it. 11:52 p.m., car recovered from the Kestrel. 12:41 a.m., patient refuses transport, lucid, signs AMA. 3:58 a.m., subject located at Halloran Recovery, Coldwater Road. 4:03 a.m., text message received, and here she read it out, flat. Mara is confused and not thinking clearly. 4:09 a.m., 911 call placed by property owner. She laid down the amendment. She read the incapacity clause. She read the part about who got to decide. And she looked at Trevor over the top of her glasses and she said, Mr. Ames, can you help the board understand why, on the same night, Ms. Sinclair went into the river and you did not go in after her? You were personally circulating a document that would have transferred authority over her affairs to you the moment a physician you helped select declared her incapacitated. He was good. I'll give him that. He talked about his concern, his deep concern, the strain she'd been under. How this was all a terrible misunderstanding that a frightened woman and an opportunistic stranger, he nodded at me warmly, had blown into something ugly. He never raised his voice. He was very reasonable, and I watched the room stop believing him. Not all at once. It's a thing you can actually see, if you're looking, a temperature change. An old board member named Pruitt, who'd known Harlan for 30 years, stopped nodding. Somebody near the window folded their hands and stopped taking notes. The more calm and warm and reasonable Trevor got about a woman nearly drowning while he stood on dry land holding a clipboard, the worse it sounded, because he never once, in all of it, said he was glad she was alive. Gloria was right. It sold itself. The board suspended the vote on the amendment. They pulled it from the agenda entirely, pending review. They froze Trevor's advisory access as to trust matters. It wasn't punishment. It was procedure. But procedure, it turns out, is what a man like that can't survive, because his whole power came from moving fast and warm through rooms before anyone thought to write anything down. Here's the part I actually remember, though. Not the vote. Halfway through, while Gloria was still laying down pages, Catherine Sinclair, who had not looked at her daughter once, reached across the empty chair between them and put her hand over Mara's hand on the table. Mara froze. I saw it from the back of the room, saw her go rigid the way she had at my kitchen window. Catherine leaned in and said something I couldn't hear, but Mara told me later. She said, I'm sorry. That was all. Not an explanation, not a defense of the year she'd spent choosing the easy story over her own child. Just I'm sorry. Mara didn't fall into her mother's arms. She didn't cry and forgive her on the spot the way people do in the movies, because real forgiveness after that kind of thing isn't a moment. It's a job you take on. And some days you show up for it, and some days you don't. She just let her mother's hand stay there. She didn't pull away. And I understood, watching it, that for Mara that was enormous. That was a woman who had learned to go still so nobody could grab her, deciding to let one person hold on. The rest took months. It always does. The insurance investigation on the car found what physics found. A vehicle that left the road at low speed on a straight section, consistent with a driver who'd stopped and was arguing, not one who'd lost control. But consistent with isn't proof, and there was no camera on that bridge. And the truth is, Trevor never faced anything worse than a harassment charge, and the protective order Mara filed the Tuesday after. He avoided the serious stuff because the river doesn't keep witnesses, and Mara refused, all the way through, to say a single thing she couldn't stand behind. That killed her at first. She wanted him ruined. She wanted a verdict with his name on it. It was Gloria again who set her straight, over pie at the diner in Marlette one afternoon in March. Mara was raging quietly about how he was going to walk, how he'd land somewhere else soft and warm and do it all again to some other family. And Gloria put her fork down and said, "Justice and punishment aren't the same thing, and you'll drive yourself into the ground if you keep waiting for them to be. Punishment is what happens to him. You don't control that. Justice is what happens to you. Right now he can't get near your money, your board, your mother, your name, or your front door. He lost the keys, Mara. Every key, that's the win. Stop measuring it by how much he suffers and start measuring it by how far away he has to stand." So that became the whole project, and it worked. Trevor Ames got removed from the trust, off every committee, out of every quiet, warm room where he'd once let himself in with a smile and a concern. The engagement dissolved into nothing, because it had mostly been nothing. The amendment died in review. Mara kept her father's vote and her father's lodge, and slowly over a lot of hard afternoons some version of her mother, you. I could stop there, and it'd be a clean story. It wasn't clean. The thing about pulling somebody out of a river is that it takes about 90 seconds, and everything after takes years, and the years are the actual rescue. Mara didn't fall into my arms grateful and healed. For a long time, we were just two people who'd been through one strange night, orbiting each other carefully. She'd come by the garage. I'd fix things at the lodge she could have paid 3 men to fix. Neither of us said anything about it. She flinched for a while at unexpected calm in a man's voice, and I learned not to be smooth, which for me was not a heavy lift. There was a night, months in, when I set a blanket on the arm of a chair beside her again, out of habit, and she looked at it, and then at me, and said, "You can hand it to me now." And that was as close to a declaration as either of us managed for about half a year. We got married 2 years after the river, on the deck at the lodge, with the mountain going gold behind us. Catherine cried, which I think surprised even Catherine. Gloria showed up in a dress and pretended she'd been forced into it. My sister Robin gave a toast that included the line, "Mara clearly has excellent judgment about everything except her taste in husbands, and possibly her taste in the men she lets fish her out of rivers," and I took the hit because it was fair. People still ask us how we met. Mara likes to say I saved her life. I always correct her every single time because it's the one thing I need to be true out loud. I pulled her out of the water. That's all I did. That's the 90 seconds. What she did after, refusing to defend herself when defending would have sunk her, telling only the parts she could stand behind, letting her mother's hand stay on hers, learning how to trust a calm voice again without going still. Mara Sinclair saved herself from every single thing that came after the river. I just happened to be the door she knocked on the night she decided she wanted witnesses to the truth, and I think that's the part nobody expects. Everybody wants the story where the man does the saving, but the bravest thing I ever watched anybody do wasn't going into cold water. It was a woman refusing, in a warm, bright room full of people who'd already half decided she was crazy, to raise her voice, even once. So let me ask you something, and I mean it. I read these. If someone you pulled out of the worst night of their life showed up at your door before dawn, terrified that a person everyone trusted was already busy rewriting what really happened, would you have opened the door? And have you ever had to fight, not just to be safe, but for the much harder thing, the right to be believed by the people who were supposed to believe you first? Tell me about it down in the comments. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.